The text message came in at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, right as I was packing my daughter's lunch. It was from my mother. Not a call, a text, which was how I knew it was going to be something she didn't want to have to say out loud. Sweetheart, your brother's engagement party is the 14th at the Hargrove Club. Formal attire. I want to make sure you have enough time to find something appropriate. The Kellermans are a very prominent family, and we want everything to be perfect for Cole. Love you. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the counter and finished making Zoe's sandwich. Cheddar and turkey on whole wheat, no crust, exactly the way she liked it. She was 6. She didn't notice that my hands had gone still for a second. Kids that age are blessedly unaware of the particular weight a mother can carry in the silence before she smiles. I knew what the text meant. It wasn't about my dress. It was a warning. A polite, monogrammed, notepaper kind of warning. But a warning, all the same. Don't embarrass us. Don't show up looking like what we think you are. Have you ever been made to feel like a footnote in your own family's story? Drop a comment and tell me, because I spent 31 years believing that was just how things were. My name doesn't matter as much as the situation, but let me paint the picture. I am the older sister. I was the first one to go to college, the first one to graduate, the first one to move across the country for a career that had nothing to do with what my mother called practical ambitions, meaning I didn't go into banking or real estate like my father's side of the family expected. Instead, I went into federal law. Specifically, I became a compliance attorney for the Department of Defense. I spent 4 years at a firm in Washington, D.C., made partner before I turned 30, and then transitioned into an in-house role that required a security clearance I still can't discuss at a dinner table. My family thought I was a paralegal, not because I lied. I never lied. I just stopped correcting them after a certain point. The first time I tried to explain what I actually did, around Thanksgiving, maybe 5 years ago, my mother nodded along with the pleasant, vaguely glazed expression she reserved for things she considered unimportant, and then pivoted to telling me about Cole's new apartment. Cole was doing so well. Cole had just been promoted. Cole was dating a girl from a good family. Cole was my younger brother by 4 years, and he was the sun around which my parents' entire solar system rotated. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I used to. Now I say it the way a doctor describes a diagnosis. Clinical, factual, no longer infected with the pain of it. Cole was getting engaged to a woman named Whitney Kellerman, whose father ran one of the largest commercial real estate development firms in the Southeast. The engagement party was being held at the Hargrove Club, a members-only venue in downtown Atlanta that charged $18,000 for private event rooms and required a 2-year membership wait list. My parents had been trying to get in for years. The Kellermans were already members. My mother had been planning this moment, I suspected, since Cole first brought Whitney home for Christmas. The text message was her way of telling me not to ruin it. I put my phone in my bag, dropped Zoe off at school, and drove to work. I didn't call. I didn't respond. I sat with it for the rest of the day the way you sit with a stone in your shoe, aware of it, irritated by it but not quite ready to deal with it until the moment is right. That evening, my mother called. "Did you get my message?" Her voice was warm, in the particular way it got when she was nervous. Light and quick, like she was juggling something fragile. "I did," I said. "I just wanted to make sure you had time to prepare. The Hargrove has a strict dress code. They actually turn people away at the door." A pause. "I know you've been so busy with Zoe and everything, and it's hard when you're doing it alone." There it was. Doing it alone. The 2 words my family had used for 3 years to describe my life since my marriage ended. As if single motherhood was a kind of ongoing failure, I was white-knuckling my way through rather than a life I had deliberately and carefully built. "I'll be fine, Mom," I said. "Of course you will. The Kellermans are going to be there, and Mr. Kellerman specifically, and Cole is hoping to join the firm after the wedding, so everyone just wants the night to go smoothly. You understand." I understood perfectly. She was telling me I wasn't the priority. She was telling me my presence was something to be managed rather than celebrated. She was telling me, in her careful, loving, devastating way, that the version of me she carried in her head, the the struggling divorcee with the government desk job and the 6-year-old and the sensible sedan, was not someone she was confident enough in to present to the Kellermans. "I'll be there," I said. "Don't worry." And then I hung up and sat for a long moment in my kitchen, watching Zoe color a picture of a horse at the table. Here is the thing about my family. They were not cruel people. They were proud people. There is a difference, but the damage feels the same. My father had built a modest construction business over 30 years, and he measured success in the things you could see: the house, the car, the club membership, the son who wore a good suit. My mother had grown up with very little and spent her adult life making sure no one could tell. She had worked hard for the image she'd built, and she guarded it the way people guard something they know could be taken from them. I had never fit the image, not because I wasn't successful. I was more successful than anyone in my family understood, but my success was invisible to them, locked inside security clearances and federal contract law and a professional reputation that existed in rooms they would never walk into. I didn't have a corner office with a view they could drive past. I didn't have a husband with a business card they could show at the country club. I had a daughter, a government laptop, and a clearance level that would have made their jaws drop if I were allowed to talk about it. I wasn't. So they filled the silence with their own story. And their story was that I was fine, probably, but a little sad, and definitely not someone to lead with. The days before the engagement party, I made a call. Not to a salon or a boutique, but to a colleague. A woman I'd worked with on a federal contracting case 2 years earlier. Her name was Judge Annette Forsyth, and she sat on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. She was also, as it happened, a member of the Hargrove Club, and she had been trying to schedule a dinner meeting with me for weeks to discuss a consulting matter related to a federal oversight committee she chaired. I suggested the 14th. At the Hargrove Club. She said that worked perfectly. I went to a boutique I'd never visited before, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I rarely had reason to shop for anything other than dark blazers and practical shoes. A stylist helped me find a deep navy gown, floor length with a clean architectural neckline, and no embellishment at all. Simple. And expensive, the way serious things often are. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings. I did my own hair. I looked in the mirror before I left and thought, there she is. Zoe asked if I was going to a ball. I told her something close enough. I arrived at the Hargrove 20 minutes before my family's party was due to begin. Judge Forsyth was already at the table, a corner booth in the main dining room, elevated slightly, with a sight line to the entire floor. She stood when she saw me and hugged me like we were old friends, which, by then, we were. "You look wonderful," she said. "So do you," I said, and I meant it. Annette Forsyth was 62 years old and had the quiet authority of someone who had never once needed to raise her voice to be heard. We ordered drinks and spread our files. The matter we were discussing was legitimate, a consulting review on federal procurement compliance for a multi-state infrastructure initiative. My signature was required on 3 documents before the committee could move forward. It was the kind of work that didn't make the news but kept the lights on for a lot of people who depended on government contracts to function. We had been working through the specifics for about 40 minutes when I heard the doors open across the room. I didn't turn around. I heard my mother's voice first. That particular elevated brightness she used in public spaces she found intimidating, the one that said we belong here slightly too loudly. Then my father's low murmur. Then Cole laughing, and Whitney laughing, and behind them the sound of the Kellerman family moving through a room the way people move when they own it. To get to the private event space, they had to cross the main dining room. They had to walk directly past our table. I heard the footsteps slow before I looked up. My mother stopped first. She was wearing a floor-length blush gown and holding a small clutch purse that I recognized as the one she'd bought for my cousin's wedding 3 years ago. Her face, when she saw me, went through something I can only describe as a short circuit. The smile she'd been wearing for the room flickered, rebooted, and then settled into something confused and wary. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice dropping half a register. "What are you doing here?" I looked up from my paperwork and smiled. "Hi, Mom." "Hey, Cole." I looked at my brother, who was watching me with wide, startled eyes. "Congratulations, Whitney, it's so good to finally meet you." Whitney was warm. She had the easy, unguarded kindness of someone who had grown up secure enough not to need pretense. "Oh my gosh, I've heard so much about you," she said, and then looked at my table with genuine curiosity. "Are you here for an event?" "A working dinner," I said. "Judge Forsyth, this is my family." I gestured. "And this is Cole's fiancée, Whitney." Annette Forsythe looked up from her reading glasses with the measured, gracious warmth of someone who had presided over appellate arguments for 15 years. "What a lovely occasion," she said. "Congratulations to you both." There was a moment of recalibration at my mother's end of the table. I could see her eyes moving, from me to Annette to the files spread across the table to the fact that the staff at the Hargrove had brought us a second round of water without being asked, which is the subtle language of a place like that for these guests matter. My father stepped forward. He had the look of a man trying to find the edge of a map he didn't know existed. "Who?" he started, then caught himself. "Are you and the judge? Do you work together?" "She's been consulting for my committee for 2 years," Annette said pleasantly. "She's one of the sharpest compliance attorneys in federal contracting. I've been trying to get her to come work directly for the court for months." She glanced at me with the particular fondness of someone who respects your choices even when they don't fully understand them. "She keeps saying no." The silence around my family was the kind that has texture. My father's mouth was slightly open. My mother had gone very still in the way she got when she was trying to process something without letting her face show it. Cole looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from him in a long time. Something between respect and genuine surprise, and then he looked at our parents, and I watched him see, maybe for the first time, what I had been quietly watching for years. It was Mr. Two, Kellerman, who broke the silence, and I was grateful for it. He stepped forward and extended a hand to Annette with the ease of someone who recognized a peer. "Annette, I didn't know you'd be here tonight." "Walter," she said warmly. They shook hands like people who'd sat on the same committees. "Your future daughter-in-law is marrying into a wonderful family, from what I understand. I hope you're very happy." He looked at me then, and I saw the moment of recognition. "Wait. You're the attorney on the Meridian Oversight Review." It wasn't quite a question. "I am," I said. He shook my hand with both of his. The kind of handshake that means something. "My general counsel talks about your work constantly. Says you're the reason the Henderson filing didn't turn into a federal investigation." He looked at my father with genuine deference, the way old money men compliment other men by proxy. "He must be very proud." My father said, "Yes." Just that. One word, and it came out slowly, like something he was reading in a language he was still learning. My mother's clutch purse was very tight in her hands. It was Cole who sat down at the edge of our table, just for a moment, not pulling up a chair, just leaning in, and said quietly, "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I looked at my brother. He was 27 and genuinely asking, and there wasn't accusation in it, just something lost and wanting to understand. I thought about the Thanksgiving where I tried to explain what I did and watched my mother's eyes slide over to the football game. I thought about every Christmas where my father asked if I was still doing that government thing, like it was a temp job I was waiting to grow out of. I thought about every birthday and phone call where the real architecture of my life was simply never inquired after. "You never asked," I said gently, "and I didn't see a reason to perform it for you." My mother made a small sound. "Sweetheart, we didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. "And I meant it without cruelty. That's the part I needed you to sit with for a while." The Kellermans moved toward the event room. "Mr. Tinkyou." Kellerman clapped my father on the shoulder and said something I didn't catch, and I watched my father straighten slightly, the way a man does when he's been seen favorably by someone whose opinion he coveted. It should have been satisfying. It was mostly just quiet. Whitney touched my arm before she left. "I really hope we get to know each other better," she said. "Cole talks about you, you know, more than you might think." I looked at my brother. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, and I loved him a little more for it. The party moved into the event space. Annette and I finished our working dinner. We ordered the salmon. We finalized the documents. I signed where I needed to sign, and she countersigned, and we talked for another hour about the particular loneliness of raising children while doing work that the people closest to you don't quite understand. She had 3 grown sons and a husband who, she said, had learned to stop asking about her cases and start asking about her days instead, which turned out to be the better question all along. Around 9 o'clock, As the event space was releasing people back into the main room, my mother found me near the coat check. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there with her blush gown and her clutch and her perfectly maintained expression, and I could see the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from holding a face in place for too long. "I owe you an apology," she finally said. "More than one." "You do," I agreed. "I was worried about the wrong things." She looked down at her purse. "I've been worried about the wrong things for a long time. I thought about saying yes, you have. I thought about listing the things. I thought about the text message at 6,047 in the morning, telling me to find something appropriate to wear, as if I were a problem to be managed, rather than a daughter to be proud of. I thought about the years of nodding and sighing and pivoting to Cole's accomplishments. The slow, steady message that I was loved but not quite worth the same investment of attention. I thought about all of it, and then I let it sit there without adding to it. "I know," I said instead. She reached out and squeezed my hand once, quick and tight, the way she used to when I was very small and she was still the person I measured safety by. Then she let go and went back to the party. I picked up Zoe from my neighbor's house at 10. She was asleep on their couch with her shoes half off, and I carried her to the car the way I had 100 times, her head heavy on my shoulder, her breath slow and even. She smelled like the grape juice she'd probably talked her babysitter into, and the generic lavender of the shampoo I bought in bulk. In the car, in the dark, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. I wasn't thinking about my father's face when he heard Walter Kellerman's words. I wasn't thinking about my mother's hand on mine. I wasn't thinking about the dress or the table or the careful architecture of a moment I quietly built from a working dinner and a standing meeting that was already overdue. I was thinking about something Annette had said over dessert, almost offhand, about her own parents. How they'd been farmers and hadn't understood her career in law. Not really, not ever, but how at a certain point she'd stopped needing them to understand it and started just needing them to show up. And how when that shift happened, everything got a little more bearable. I thought about my mother's grip on my hand. I thought about Cole's face when he said, "You never told us." I thought about the fact that understanding and showing up were two different things, and that maybe, slowly, imperfectly, not all at once, we were working our way toward the second one. I drove home through the quiet Atlanta streets with my daughter asleep in the back seat. The city lights came and went through the windows. I didn't put music on. Some things don't need a soundtrack. They just need to be driven through carefully, with both hands on the wheel and your eyes on what's ahead. The next morning, Zoe woke up and asked if I'd had fun at my ball. I told her yes. She asked if I danced. I thought about it. About the particular precision of a life lived on your own terms, the way it requires a kind of constant, quiet choreography that no one sees but you. The small daily choices that add up to a self you can live in without apology. "Not exactly," I said, "but I think I will soon." She accepted this with the total equanimity of a 6-year-old who has never doubted her mother's competence and asked for waffles, and I made them, and the morning was ordinary and mine and completely enough. There's a moment I keep coming back to, not the one where Walter Kellerman shook my hand, not the one where my father said yes, like a man reading words in a foreign language. The moment I keep returning to is earlier than all of that. It's Zoe at the kitchen table, dark curls over her face, choosing a crayon, completely unaware that her mother had just read a text message designed to make her feel small. She didn't know. And that's the thing that clarified everything for me. I had spent years protecting my daughter from the particular kind of damage that comes from being told, in soft and careful language, that you are not quite enough. I had done that instinctively, the way you do things when the reason is too obvious to articulate. But sitting in that kitchen, watching her color, I understood something I hadn't fully put into words before. I couldn't teach her to trust her own worth if I kept quietly accepting the message that mine was negotiable. The consequences of my silence weren't abstract. Every time I nodded along, every time I let my mother's image of me go uncorrected, I was making a small decision that the truth wasn't worth the trouble. And small decisions compound. They accumulate into a posture, a habit of self-erasure that eventually starts to look, from the outside, exactly like the failure people assumed you were. What I did that night wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that because I'd thought about it a lot. I didn't engineer that evening to humiliate anyone. I scheduled a legitimate working dinner with a colleague I genuinely needed to meet with, and I let the geography of the moment do what it did. The difference matters. Revenge is about making someone else feel pain. What I did was about finally refusing to manage other people's comfort at the expense of my own truth. That distinction took me years to understand. It required a kind of honesty with myself that I had avoided, because being honest about the situation meant being honest about my own role in it. I had stayed silent not just because I was private, not just because my work was classified, but because some part of me had absorbed the message. Some part of me had believed, on days when I was tired and the apartment felt too quiet, and Zoe had a fever and I was eating cereal for dinner, that maybe they were right. Maybe I had made choices that placed me outside the circle of their approval. And maybe that meant I deserved to stand a little to the left of everything. Letting go of that belief was the real work, harder than any federal filing I've ever touched. It required the kind of integrity that isn't loud, the kind that's just you, alone at 11 at night, deciding not to send the apologetic text, deciding to stop shrinking yourself to fit a frame someone else built for you. It also required Zoe, not in a sentimental way. She didn't give me a speech or teach me a lesson. She just existed, fully and without apology. And I watched her do it every single day and thought, she learned that from somewhere. And the only honest answer was that she learned it from watching me on the days I got it right. I'm not done getting it right. I'm still figuring out what it means to let my family back in without letting them back into the position of authority over my self-definition. That's slower work. It doesn't resolve in one evening in a private club. But Zoe asked if I danced, and I said not exactly, and she accepted that completely. She didn't need the full picture. She just needed to know her mother had shown up for herself. That's what I'm still learning to do. Show up, with both hands on the wheel and your eyes on what's ahead, and enough quiet confidence to believe that where you're going is worth the drive.